Well, hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Cait podcast. It is Cait, and today's episode is sort of a fun one. It's sort of a shift from our typical, advice or messy middle or guest. And today I'm actually going to go through and answer my most common questions that I get in my DMs, in my email. There's sort of a theme that comes up with these questions. And I was like, you know what? I'm just going to put this all onto a podcast episode. I think this is pretty fun. And I actually think it's a really fun way for us as a community to also celebrate the podcast, because you guys, we have seriously been growing a lot lately. We are growing at a really rapid rate, and it's really cool to see. And this is one of those things where we grow together, and we grow because you guys are sharing the podcast, you're tagging it, you're, letting people know that you should listen to it. And it's just a really cool thing to see. So I was like, you know what, for today's episode this week, I'm going to go through some of the most common questions that I get. And I think that you'll be able to, get your questions answered if you've wondered these as well. And then of course, per usual, always applying this into your own life. Before we dive into it today, I just want to ask and remind you to please go leave a written 5-star review. I know it's so redundant to say that, but like literally you have no idea how much it helps the podcast. So if you've listened to this even one time, and maybe it was an interview with someone, leave a review about them too, because it's helpful for those people if they go on other people's podcasts someday, or, it's just good exposure for them as well. And we have some baller guests on their way that are so inspiring, you guys. Like, you're going to be so pumped for guests that are lined up here in 2023. So much goodness to come. Leave a review. But let's dive on into this today. So the first super common question that I always get is, do I miss teaching? So I was a teacher for 4 years. It was what I truly thought I was going to do the rest of my life. I knew that I wanted to be a teacher from the time that I was in high school. When I was in high school, I remember wanting to teach and thinking about it. And elementary school seemed like a really good fit for me to go pursue that. So I went to the University of Minnesota Duluth. I was in their teaching program, which was a dual like licensure or whatever degree. And so I have my actual degrees in elementary education and special education with a focus in emotional behavior disorders. So that's actually my background. And when it comes to teaching in a classroom, and the environment of teaching at a school, there are times I do miss it. I loved my colleagues, in all of my years too that I've been out of the classroom. Like, I've never bashed or been like, teaching is a horrible profession. It didn't end up being for me ultimately with the life schedule I wanted to have. But like, I had the best colleagues. I worked at 2 different schools, and I had the best students. I had some of my best memories, and honestly, some of my closest friends still are people that I met through my teaching profession. And so there are times I miss it. I mean, kids are hilarious, and there's so many fun things about being a teacher, but ultimately I don't miss having to be stuck in that profession. And I do use the word stuck intentionally. A big eye-opening thing for me when I was teaching, particularly when I went to the second school that I taught at, was the complacency factor that I felt happened in this profession. The complacency of the fact that you don't get to generate or create more income. You are like stuck in these lanes, and the only way to get more income is to go to more school. Like, that from the very beginning to me made 0 sense, because I already was getting basically nothing to do this job. So, for me, there are elements I miss of teaching, but ultimately that was not a profession that I wanted to stay stuck in for my entire career. And really what's so cool now looking at this, and, I walked away from my career as a teacher at 27 years old. It took me 2 years to build my body business from a part-time side business to a thriving, income growing, life-giving business. And I feel like I get to teach every single day. I mean, it is truly a blessing that I've gotten to use my skills in another way with what I do now as a coach and with the podcast and everything. So yes, there's elements I miss of teaching, but ultimately I don't miss that actual career. And I'm really glad that I'm doing what I'm doing now. And entrepreneurship is not for the weak of heart. definitely has ups and downs, but so did teaching. You know, I had students that dealt with homelessness. I had students that dealt with really emotional things at home. I had students that struggled with learning disabilities, and that was really hard too. And I think when it comes down to life, you always have to just choose your hard. And for me, I'd rather choose the hard of the unknowns, I guess, of entrepreneurship and, you know, doing this over here rather than the hardship of what came with my teaching career. But teachers, you are literally the best, and you should get paid a bazillion dollars. You do not get paid enough. I highly also encourage, if you are a teacher listening to this and you're in that profession, go do a side hustle and do something that you can do from home. You know, I always was thinking about how could I create more income as a elementary school teacher. And I thought about, could I waitress? Could I bartend? But I was so fucking tired from teaching all day that when coaching fell into my lap and partnering with Body fell into my lap, it was a really perfect opportunity to create a secondary income from home. And some of my best memories and some of my first goals in building my Body business, partnering with Body, and I'm using the word Body because we're shifting to that name from Beachbody to Body. It's way better. But so many of my first goals went right back to my students. It was getting a rug for my classroom. It was buying dollar store materials. It was literally to fund my classroom, because you don't get a pretty classroom. You don't get good materials unless you go buy them. So, yeah, teachers, you're the best. And if you ever are interested in starting a side hustle, this made me such a better teacher. But I think there's lots of things you could do. I've had friends who have, you know, supplement their teaching income with photography or whatever. So great profession, just not for me in the long run. And if you do want a more detailed version of my story, I should probably update this. If you scroll back, and I will link it, I have a bonus episode from 2021 where I go into pretty in-depth detail of my story and how I went from a teacher to this business and all of that. So question number 1, do you miss teaching? There's the answer. All right. Question number 2 that I always get is around motherhood. And it is about, when are you planning and are you ready for baby number 2? So my daughter at the time of this recording is about 20 months. She'll be 2 in April. And yes, we want a second child. It is definitely something that we're thinking about doing here. I've been working through a lot of this birth trauma with Ellie and really working through the fear of the actual process of having a child again. I've been very vocal about this on my social media. I do not want to end up in a emergency situation again. And for me, it really is a dream of mine to have a redemption birth. And so those things really go into factoring for baby number 2, as well as, you know, do we have the mental capacity, emotional capacity, financial capacity? Like, there's a lot of shit that goes into having a second kid. And I definitely want to, because my daughter is like my favorite human in the world. Like, she's literally the coolest thing ever. She gives me so much purpose, and she's so fucking cute and fun. So I definitely want to have that too. And I've said this before on the podcast, I don't actually find being a mother that difficult. It's life around motherhood that gets difficult. And so I think my biggest you know, obviously excitement to have a second kid would be to have that love, multiply that love, you know, have Ellie have a sibling, have her have a friend, like, you know, do it again, have a cute little squishy baby, all those things. But there's the real crap that comes with it too, of like, do I have the capacity? Because quite frankly, like when she goes to bed at 7:30, like, I'm good for the night. I can go work. I can go take a bath. I can go watch a show. Like, it has gotten to an easier point. So part of me is just mentally preparing that it would become an absolute gong show to have a second kid. And mamas listening to this, please DM me and explain to me, how do you like have a second kid and how do you love them as much? Because that is something I still don't quite understand. I'm like, wait, what if I don't like the second one? But yeah, I'd say that's something that we'd be working towards, God willing. And I'll keep you in the loop when it does or doesn't happen. But if you do want to kind of dive into some more like motherhood stuff, episode 29 is Ellie's birth story. To this day, it is still my number 1 listened to, most circulated episode. That's episode 29. I go into detail. I have never gone back and listened to it, honestly. And it would be so interesting to listen to it now, now after going to all this therapy for the birth trauma. At the time of that recording, I definitely did not realize the latent trauma that would come from that experience. But her birth story is there if you want to listen to it. And then episode 90 of my podcast, I really dive into the complexities of asking and thinking about baby number 2. So if you're in a similar journey or you have a friend that is, go send that her way because it might help her. All right. Very common question I'm getting in my DMs. Number 3 is, what is EMDR therapy and what is it like? Like, what is it? So I'm actively searching to get a therapist on here to talk about EMDR therapy. So if you are listening to this and you know someone who's a therapist who does EMDR, send them my way. I'm not going to have my therapist come on here because I think that's weird for you guys to like meet the woman helping me through this. But if you know someone who can talk about this topic, send her or him my way because I think it's fascinating. So EMDR therapy is trippy as F. I will tell you that. And here's also the deal. Like, there's different types of trauma. There's big T trauma, which is like, you know, the really, really, really big stuff, like witnessing somebody, you know, dying, or like a massive car accident or a war. Like, those are big T traumas. But then there's the little T traumas, right? Like, for me, when EMDR first came into like my scope and my sphere here of like doing it, a part of me felt really stupid because I'm like, I'm not a fucking war veteran. Like, I had a bad birth experience. But what I've really learned is that EMDR can be used for so many different things. And I highly encourage you to look into it if you have struggled with any type of trauma. And like, honestly, that could be like a really bad breakup. And I go way more into depth with like confronting my birth trauma on episode 97 of the Cait Take. So if you want to listen to that, it's there. But what is it like? Basically, you are really the discoverer of your issues and your trauma, and you kind of uncover where your brain is going. Okay. So it's very Alice in Wonderland. So for example, I sought out EMDR therapy to work through the trauma, the fear that I had surrounding my emergency C-section with my daughter. So when you go there, you know, you talk with your therapist a few times first before you actually dive into the EMDR therapy. And there's different modalities that they use for EMDR, but what my therapist uses is you hold these little buzzers in your hands, and it is a bilateral process. So it buzzes in your right hand, then it bumps over and buzzes in your left, right, left. And so basically what's happening is that this bilateral stimulation is happening, and it's happening physically in your body while you're literally kind of walking through these traumatic experiences. Like, it's like a memory. So like, you close my eyes, you kind of go to that place, you go to the scene, you walk through it, you think, and you're not talking out loud. Like, you're quiet, your eyes are closed, you're thinking about it while you're holding these buzzers that are bilaterally buzzing. And then your therapist kind of guides you out of it and is like, what did you see? And then you kind of talk about it. And then, you know, she'll say something like, okay, go there. And then you close your eyes again, you think about it. And then you open your eyes again. What did you see? You talk about it, go there. What has been so crazy about EMDR therapy for me, and my therapist assured me that this is a very normal thing and that your brain is processing trauma correctly, is that you think you're going one direction and you end up in a completely different spot. So when I started my EMD therapy, you know, we went right to the source of my trauma that I was trying to work through, of Ellies' birth. And so I closed my eyes and I pictured it, and you kind of play it like a movie in your head. And, you know, I was thinking about all the scary parts of her birth. And for me, what it really uncovered was it wasn't her whole birth that was traumatic by any means. I've said it was beautiful and empowering, and there was so much surrender in it. For me, I was able to pinpoint, okay, my uterine bleed was the really traumatic part. That surgery part was really traumatic for me. But that's not where I ended up. My brain in the past month doing this has bounced to so many different scenarios that like I am now processing, I feel like, a completely different problem when I'm at therapy. So what I realized through these sessions of EMDR, a huge piece that was coming up to me of additional trauma was this feeling that I'm not good enough. And that Ellie's birth is such a representation to me of I'm a failure, and that it doesn't matter how hard I work in life, that I'm always going to come up short. And that's a limiting belief that I have. We all have our own limiting beliefs in life, and that's mine. It is my default that I go to when I feel like I'm failing. It's like, well, it's you, Cait, you're not good enough. And I, kind of had this like epiphany in this therapy session of like, oh, so this is extra traumatic because I just feel like I'm not good enough. Okay. So same shit, different day, same shit, different scenario. And what this is ultimately doing for me is it's really uncovering my perfectionism and the way that it's kind of been just pushed down the past few years. I've come an extremely far way as a perfectionist, and maybe you feel this way too if you are one. But damn, that bitch she is rooted in me. And I'm going to definitely keep exploring this EMDR therapy. And, we have some guests coming up. Like I said, I'm looking for a therapist to come on. Soon we're going to have Shelby Kulzer on as a guest, and she does a lot of healing work energetically. And we're going to do some shit like surrounding that. So I'm not out of that yet by any means with this perfectionism, but it's life-changing. And I highly suggest you go find an EMDR therapist if you have some sort of trauma that you need to work through, because it's probably going to uncover some other crap that you need to work through too. And, the second piece of that question that I'm getting a lot lately is, how am I doing with it? I'm feeling better overall. Like I said, we're definitely thinking about baby number 2 more seriously now. And I feel, a lot more hope in having a second birth, having a redemption birth, going for that. I've had a lot of success with physical therapy and pelvic floor work and working through some of the physical pain I've had from that experience. So I'm feeling a lot better than I was before. I don't think I'm out of the woods, and I don't think I'll be out of the woods until, God willing, I get pregnant again and am able to have a birth experience and see how it goes a second time. But my hope and my dream is that that would be a very healing experience and a very redemptive experience. Okay. What does a typical workday look for you? AKA, what the F do you do, Cait? Is one of my most common questions that I get in my DMs, in my messages, when people are like, wait, what do you do? You're a coach? Like, what is that? And so I just thought it'd be kind of fun to answer that one, since I really get that so much. So what I do is I partner with Body, and Body is formerly known as Beachbody. We are a health and fitness company. And what's really cool about this name change is that we've really made a shift into health esteem, into really looking at the overall diet industry, diet culture, all of that, and how have we contributed to that, and how can we help that solution. And I think the cool thing about the name change with the company that I partner with is that it really does align with who we are as a company. I won't lie to you, I've gotten shit over the years that people are like, it's Beachbody, blah, 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 network marketing, MLM. It's like, I really don't give a fuck what people think about that, because this has given me so much freedom, and I'm not some sleazy ass sales girl. And I feel that way. And I know that because I create a community. The women that I work with in my boot camps, we focus on fitness and nutrition and mindset and routines and personal development. And you know what? I'm not someone who, like, if you join one of my boot camps, I'm not like, go lose 5 pounds. That's not what it's about. Like, I don't give a fuck about that. I care that you're living a healthy, fulfilling life. And so, yeah. So anyway, that's a little side tangent of that. But so what I do as a coach is I help, there's kind of 2 pieces to it. The first part of what I do is I help women with their health and fitness goals. So I help women, I share my journey on social media. I invite people to join me that are following along on my social media who, have shown interest, and I help get them set up with a program that's a good fit for them. And so I've never claimed to be an expert ever in the health and fitness. I'm just a normal woman who's worked through this myself. I lost 20 pounds initially with these programs. I lost 45 pounds of baby weight. But beyond that, I've worked on my mindset. I've worked on my nutrition, all of those things. So I help women get started with their programs. And then and I love that, but what I really love is mentoring people to build a business. And ultimately that's where most of my time is spent, is helping clients get started in the boot camp side. But then I help women learn how to build their business on the side of their careers to either have it be something that enhances their current career or build it to a full-time thing like I do. And so what I do now as a full-time coach and a mom looks completely different than where I started 7 years ago. And again, go back to that bonus episode that I'll link that kind of tells my full story. But today, what a typical week and work day looks like for me is that my daughter goes to daycare Monday through Thursdays. She usually gets to daycare about 8:30, and I have to pick her up at 4 p.m. on the dot because she goes to an in-home daycare. So I really love that because we have flexibility of, I don't have to rush her out the door. We kind of can have our slow mornings together. So a typical work day for me looks like getting up around 5:30, drinking pre-workout, going down into my basement, doing a little bit of personal development, working out, showering, getting ready, and then getting my daughter up. She is an early riser, usually around 6:30. So usually my husband gets her up and then we tag team. Her and I have breakfast together. We get her ready for the day. We play, we hang out. My husband brings her to daycare. And then I get to work. I always focus on my business first. So I always work on, growing my sales funnel. And yes, I'm going to say sales because my job starts after a sale, after I help a woman purchase her program and get started. So I always work on, my own social media. What am I marketing this week? Do I have a boot camp to prep for? Those types of things. And I work on my personal business first and, doing that first part that's going to grow my income. I'll record a podcast episode or do a podcast interview during the day. I'll usually try to do that in the same day, edit it, get it done. And then the back half of my afternoon is typically focused on my team. I will do one-on-one calls with coaches who need guidance. I'll host a training call. I'll put together resources for them to build their businesses. And in the afternoon, I focus on my team. I help them so that they can grow their incomes, they can grow their businesses. And then I pick my daughter up and I am very present with her. Like when I'm done at 4:00, like I'm not answering messages, I'm not answering emails, DMs, anything. I'm hanging out with her. And then as most parents know, it's a shit show usually between 4 to 7 p.m. Zach comes home, we hang out as a family, dinner, bedtime, and then I typically go to bed pretty early too. So that's a typical work day for me, but I love it because I try to hit shit real hard in the beginning of the week. Thursdays, I usually will go work at a coffee shop or meet up with a friend who's also, a fellow entrepreneur or a fellow coach. I like to get out of the house and see other people. And then Fridays, my daughter doesn't have daycare. So we always go do something fun. We have play dates. We go to the children's museum. We go to indoor playgrounds, whatever it is. We have Fridays together all day. We take it super slow. And I love it. The flexibility of being able to be a mom and have this business is so life-giving. And to be able to have the choice in how often she goes to daycare and when she goes. And if she's sick, I can drop everything and pick her up. I'm not saying that's always easy, but it's truly a dream come true. And what I'm living right now was what I always wanted, was a business that gave me both. The ability to be a mom, to be present, to be there, and have my own thing. So that's what a typical workday looks like for me as a full-time coach. And it is honestly a dream job. I never want a boss again in my life. Nobody tell me where to go, when to be there, how much I can earn. No, entrepreneurship is not for the faint of heart for sure. I actually don't think being a full-time coach is for everyone. I think that coaching is an amazing vessel as a part-time side hustle. I think it's brilliant. It's brilliant. Because you can do it from home in your PJs and you can earn trips. And there's a lot of amazing perks of this as a part-time thing. I don't think full-time coaching is for everyone, but for the people that it's for, who have the drive and the work ethic and can really make this, like, it's amazing. It's freaking amazing. Okay. Back to a personal question. If your husband has been sober for 9 years, how do you still drink? This is such a common question I get. My husband, episode 5, actually, of the Cait Take, way back in 2020, Zach was one of my first guests, and he shared his entire story of his journey to recovery. and rock bottom. And Lord knows my husband's had some rock bottom moments. So we really dive into it to that episode. So I'm not going to go too into that in this episode, but really it comes down to communication. As a spouse of an alcoholic, of someone who's, always going to be actively in recovery, this was a conversation we had on date number 2. And, for me, I met Zach when he was 11 months sober. So that was already important to him. And I know that there's probably women listening to this whose spouse, or maybe even yourself, you're battling alcoholism now, you're battling addiction now. So that's a conversation that you'll have to have with your spouse of what are your boundaries. But for us, we just kind of drew those boundaries from the start. And, just because he's in recovery doesn't mean I have to be in our relationship. That works fine. The other piece of this is I'm not a massive drinker. Like I'll go have a glass of wine or a cocktail if I'm out to dinner with my girlfriends, or if Zach and I are on a date night, but I'm not someone who drinks during the week ever. Like I think I have like 2 White Claws in our, bar fridge downstairs. And I don't keep hard liquor or anything like that because I'm just such a lightweight. I would be fucking hammered. So, yeah, go listen to episode 5. And that's another, probably one of my top circulating episodes, even still to this day, is Zach's sobriety story. And I know that a lot of people struggle with sobriety. I know right now, a lot of people are doing dry January. And also go back and listen to episode 106 with Alexander. She's a sobriety coach. So if you struggle with addiction, drinking, all of that, there's resources for you there. And just know that like recovery is possible, and I've seen it, and it's an ongoing thing you'll always do, but it's pretty powerful too. Okay. The last question I'm going to answer that I typically get is, can you talk about, or a question I get is, do you experience mom guilt? And did you experience mom guilt in your pumping journey? If you don't know, I did not, well, you probably don't know, but I didn't breastfeed because when I initially had Ellie, my C-section incision was so fucking painful that like, I thought breastfeeding was like, oh, you take your baby, you put it on your nipple and like you hang out. No, it's a lot more physical than that. And so it hurt. And so I just initially completely opted in for pumping. So if you have any pumping questions, reach out to me because I was an exclusive pumper. But no, when it comes to mom guilt, there are times, of course, I experience mom guilt. Everyone does. I don't think it's possible to experience it. There are certain things I don't feel guilty about. I don't feel guilty about sending her to daycare. I don't feel guilty when I go to get my hair done. I don't feel guilty when I am with my friends. I don't feel guilty when I go on retreats for my business, because I am a firm believer that the way to be an amazing mom is to not lose yourself completely in motherhood. It's impossible to not lose parts of yourself in motherhood because it's an all-consuming job, but I don't feel bad living my own life because ultimately I want a daughter who lives a full life and is she's a multifaceted person too. So when it comes to mom guilt though, I just get really curious. Why do I feel that way? If I'm feeling guilty about something, why? And I think when you can have curiosity, you reduce shame. And we need to reduce shame because shame is just, Brene Brown talks about shame is just one of the absolute darkest, hardest things to come back from. And so when it comes to mom guilt, when it comes to things like, did I feel guilty that I didn't breastfeed? Fuck no. My kid ate. She was the chubbiest freaking baby alive. And when I switched to formula, I was like, damn, formula is pretty easy. Maybe the next baby, I just go straight to that. Like, it's just going to be normal. And, I think the big thing with mom guilt is just getting curious as to why you feel that way. And just know it's normal. It's so normal to feel that way. Okay. Actually, last question that I've gotten a lot, when it comes to the podcast is next goals in life, podcast, and then who's been my favorite guest. It is so hard to pick a favorite guest because these have been honestly, the guests on the Cait are so good. Like they are so good. But I think my personal favorite guest was Danny Pellegrino. If you didn't listen to Danny's episode, go back and listen to it. Danny was like my biggest dream guest ever. And probably like, unless I get Jenna Kutcher on here, who might like take him out of the top spot, like Danny Pellegrino was an ultimate dream guest. He was so good. I also loved Britt Anderson's episode. Just, she's so inspiring. There's been so many good guest episodes. And if you go to the Cait Take highlight on my Instagram, I highlight all of my past guests. So you can always like go and see who's been on here. But I'd say Danny Pellegrino was my biggest win. It was just so cool. And I just love him so much. And my next goals for the podcast is to really have it grow. You know, right now we're almost to 50,000 downloads, which is really incredible. Like I said, we've had some incredible growth, and my goal is to double that this year, is to have 100,000 downloads. I would pee my pants. I mean, to know that the message of helping millennial women live lives they actually love and taking action and being inspired, like if that could continue to go help other people, like I would be so tickled. I'd be so, so happy and proud of that. And I'm proud of what I've built here, and I'm proud of what we've built here. And I just know that it's just the beginning. And, you know, like I said on last week's episode with the Cinderella, what she got wrong, there's a piece of this where, you know, goals take time. And sometimes they don't go as fast as we wish that they would. And that's okay. We can learn so many lessons along the way. And we can really enjoy the journey and live in the dream now while we're working towards that next one. So the way that we get to that 100K is you guys, right? Like I can put the content out, but you've got to share it, tag me, give it to a friend, leave the review, all of that. And I just think it's really cool that we are building this together. So a little bit different of an episode today. Those are truly, like, I was like, you know what? I'm going to do most common DMs I get, because I just think it's so fun when, you know, you can kind of answer those in one spot. But truly, this is sort of a love letter to you, to today listeners. I appreciate you. I'm so glad that you're here. If there's anything else you want to know, if there's anything that I covered on here today that you're like, ooh, can you elaborate on that? Shoot me a DM. Like, you know, I am an open book, and I'm always cheering you on for your dreams to become a reality. And let's freaking do it together, guys. So if you love this episode, give it a screenshot, tag me on Instagram, leave the review, follow me on all the things. You guys know the deal. I'll see you next week on the Cait Take. I've got an incredible guest that you're not going to want to miss, and I cannot wait for you to hear it. So talk to you later. Love ya. Bye-bye.